When I was a kid at school, uh, I used to get these report cards that were, I mean, I had taught myself kind of to read before I got to kindergarten, and kindergarten seemed to be like it was geared for another group of kids, if you know what I mean. They're playing with blocks and trying to figure out a bathroom and stuff like that. And they all seemed like that didn't make sense to me. And I liked painting and making paintings, and the teachers saw that. And so, but I would frequently be the kid who asked a question that upset the progress of the day. It was like I can remember they'd have us in the hallway for duck and cover. Remember, we were hiding from the bomb. And we're all down, and I put up my hand and I said, "But what about those windows right there?" And the teacher would say, "Go to the office. The principal needs to talk to you." And I had to be lectured on, you're not supposed to say things like that. And so anyway, I was in my second grade class. We had a young teacher who wore pencil dresses, and her name was Miss Bernstein. And we loved Miss Bernstein because she was young and attractive. And we had this classroom of, these people that were, some of them were trying to figure out, just basic hygiene, and others were like, so she did not like people who asked too many questions. And I was one of those kids who was always getting written on the report card, talks too much, interrupts the progress of the class, has too many questions, that kind of thing. So anyway, she figured out that if she could put me in the cloakroom, and they give me paper. I would make these huge paintings and paper posters, and they would put them on the billboards in the hallways. And I was happy. And she said, "Now the deal is you don't talk to your parents about what you're doing in here, and you can have as much paper and paint as you want." And so that was okay for me. So I wasn't paying any attention to what the rest of the class was doing. So anyway, we we got to go to the University of Pennsylvania to the Museum of Archaeology. Now, previously, it was the Atom Age, and Miss Bernstein had told us that our hand soon we weren't going to need all these fingers. We were because we're just going to be pushing buttons. We're not going to need to hold things anymore. And she said, and proof is that your little finger is already getting smaller. You can see that. And we look at it, right? So I lifted my desk and I traced my hand on the inside of the desk. And every day when I come in, I'd lift the desk and put my hand against it to see if overnight it had gotten any smaller. And so I was taking this woman seriously. And so we go to the University of Pennsylvania, and they're showing us the Egyptians, and we get in front of this box, and there's a mummy in the case. And the guide is saying, "This mummy is 3,500 years old." So I'm looking at it, and I put my hand up. She said, "You'll have a question." I said, "How do you know that this mummy is 3,500 years old?" She says, "Well, we have a process. It's called carbon 14, and we can test it, and we know that's how old it is." And I put up my hand. I said, "Well, what is carbon 14?" And she said, "Well, carbon 14 is you have this radioactive, she goes through this thing. And I said, "You mean the atom?" She said, "That's right." Now, I know we're in the age of the atomic energy, so it made perfect sense with what we were learning in school. So I said, "You're certain that this mummy is 3,500 years old?" "Absolutely," she said. So I look down at the mummy's hand and I'm studying the hand, and I see the mummy's fingers are just like mine, that little finger is no bigger or no, no, it's the same. So I look at the hand, and then I look over at Miss Bernstein, who's glaring at me for asking too many questions, right? And I look at it and I said, "That woman's been lying to me all along here." So I learned I learned early on. And so I have had encounters with other teachers who knew me going through school, and they said, "All you talked about was art. That's all you cared about. You wanted to talk about art, big art. It was never like something nice. It was something big, a big idea, very dramatic." And so that's kind of that's why I think it was programmed into me, from the very beginning.